Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gorilla Whale, a Godzilla watch-along podcast. I am your kaiju consultant, Kevin Carpenter.
And I am the tourist throwing up into the boat sickness vomit bag thing, Kayla Knudsen.
An incredible start.
Well, there's a lot of boats on this one.
There is a lot of boats in this movie.
There's a lot of seafaring adventures. And listen, I can count on one hand how many times I've been on a big boat.
I've been on big boats a few times, but I've also been on a lot of small boats and in a storm or roll in, so I don't like small boats that much. But anyway, before we begin, dear listeners, we have to apologize, as we called this movie Godzilla vs. King Kong in our previous episode. This is King Kong vs. Godzilla. And it's important to note that back in 1962, King Kong got the top billing because he was more popular at the time. That's very important to note.
Godzilla was actually the backup, which I think we'll probably talk about.
Oh,
he
yes.
was the substitute. But yeah, if you want to know why he was so popular, you can check out our bonus episode where Kevin and I discuss the original King Kong movie. Just head on over to our Ko-fi to throw a few bucks our way, and we'll have links in the show notes to that. That said, you don't need to have seen the original King Kong to understand King Kong versus Godzilla. And also, you probably already know who King Kong is just from pop culture osmosis.
Yeah. In fact, probably the more you know about King Kong will detract from your experience of watching this movie, because they take some creative liberties with King Kong.
Yeah, it's what a fascinating movie.
This movie is so fascinating. So let's get right into it. So first off,
Yeah, Kevin, give us the context.
the context. This historical context starts not in Japan, but in Hollywood, California. It's 1960. Stop-motion animator Willis O'Brien, the man who animated King Kong, has an idea. Let's resurrect Kong, put him in San Francisco, and have him fight a giant monster created by Victor Frankenstein's grandson. King Kong versus Frankenstein. However, no American studio picks it up, because O'Brien, of course, wants to use stop motion, which is expensive. So O'Brien trusts producer John Beck with the idea of King Kong vs. Frankenstein. This turns out to be a horrible mistake. Behind his back, John Beck kicks O'Brien out of the project and sells the idea to Toho in Japan. Classic Hollywood, baby.
Okay, I have read the Frankenstein novel. I don't think I've actually seen like the movie, which I know takes a lot of liberties from the book.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book, Victor Frankenstein dies well before he could ever have children. So does Frankenstein in the movie universe fuck?
I suppose. I mean, he would have had to have been able, like, maybe he made his own grandson.
How?
I mean, either the traditional way, or maybe he made another Frankenstein Jr., and then he got sex. Well, I guess it's a whole thing in the original Frankenstein book that Victor Frankenstein is actually very scared of Frankenstein having kids and creating a superior race of Frankensteins. So I don't know. We're just going to go with, at some point, the college student who is not a doctor, Victor Frankenstein, fucked, had a kid, and then that kid fucked and had a grandson, and then that grandson was like, hey.
In the movies, he's not a college student. He is a doctor.
Oh,
Does
there
he
you
live? Anyway, no, it doesn't matter. What was Toho doing?
This is not. There is a lot of liberties being taken in these movies. Like, hang on, moment of silence, by the way, to mourn the movie that never was, King Kong versus Frankenstein.
I don't understand. Oh, that's right. He makes a giant Frankenstein monster.
It's a giant Frank, and he would fight him in San Francisco in the 60s. That would have been awesome. Anyway.
Every day I wake up and Kevin subjects me to more cursed movie knowledge.
Learn. But
I feel like... Okay, hold on. Say your bit, and then I'm going to say something.
Okay, yeah. There's just one last paragraph on the context. So John Beck kicks O'Brien out of the project. He sells the idea and the Kong movie rights to Toho in Japan. And Toho, they also don't want to make King Kong versus Frankenstein, but they have their own idea. It is now 1962, Toho's 30th anniversary. Television has swept the nation, threatening the entire movie industry. History sure does rhyme, huh? Mm-hmm. Toho needs a spectacle to get butts in seats. So what if, instead of a giant Frankenstein's monster, Kong fought the king of all monsters?
I feel like it should be important to note here, because it is 1960, so
1962.
not only has it been... Okay, sorry, it's 1960 when Willis O'Brien first gets the idea to do a King Kong sequel of some kind. And the original one came out in 1933. But as you said, at this point, television is a thing and is sweeping the nation. And as I think we may be mentioned in our King Kong bonus episode, part of the, what was happening, part of the reason that Kong endured is because it was a popular rerun on television.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the rerun adhered to the Hays Code, whereas the movie itself was pre-Hays Code, so there's discrepancies and things that were cut in between the two versions. But yeah, that this makes sense to me that because Kong had a resurgence in this time period with the rise of television, that they would be yeah, this is a viable option.
Yeah.
But interesting that Toho was then also threatened by TV and was we need to make a big blockbuster. Well, it predates blockbusters, but a big spectacle movie to sell movie tickets.
Yeah, and it's fast.
Even though at this point, most of the audience knows about Kong.
Yeah.
From TV.
Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating because this movie itself is about spectacle. It's very much like Jordan Peele's Nope if Jordan Peele wasn't in on his own joke. Or rather, sorry, I'm going to add a little bit of more historical context here. They bring back Ishiro Honda for this movie. Godzilla Raids Again comes out, they tried another director, and then they're like, okay, we got to get Honda back because this is 7 years after Godzilla Raids Again. And they're like, hey, we need a spectacle. Honda, Godzilla's your guy. Give us a Kong versus Godzilla movie. And Honda is on the record, in interviews stating I didn't really want to do this. But then when it became my project, it's well, I got to put in my best effort.
I do want to, you said this movie is Nope if Jordan Peele wasn't in on his own joke, but Honda is in on the joke.
You're right. The comparison is more if Monkey Paw, if Jordan Peele's studio wasn't in on the joke, but Jordan Peele was in on the joke. Sorry, my metaphor is falling apart here, but it's basically
I understand what you're trying to get at. I would argue people are a little bit more in on, studios are a little bit more in on the joke than you think they are.
Yeah.
They just also know that it's going to take money. The studios are willing to take jokes, are willing to be the butt of the joke if they get cash out of it. See,
any satire on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Leverage Redemption is on Amazon Prime, and Leverage Redemption and Leverage the original are just treatises of Amazon and its are evil. But Amazon's that's fine, we don't care, we want the money. That's kind of the whole thing. So anyway, go into the summary here.
Well, real quick, there's a quote I want to read from the autobiography. Wait, autobiography is when someone else wrote it, right? Or is autobiography...
Autobiography is when you write it. That's the auto part of it.
Cool. Okay, so the biography...
Auto means self.
Yes. The biography, Ishiro Honda, Life and Film from Godzilla to Kurosawa. Definitely check it out. It's a great read. Ishiro Honda says, people were making a big deal out of ratings, but my own view of TV shows was that they did not take the viewer seriously, that they took the audience for granted. So I decided to show that through my own movie. And then another quote, the reason I showed the monster battle through the prism of a ratings war was to depict the reality of the times. When you think of King Kong just plain fighting Godzilla, it's stupid. But how you stage it, the times in which it takes place, that's the thought process of the filmmaker. I love Honda. He's great.
Yeah. It was, let's do the summary and then I'll get into...
Let's do the summary. Pacific Pharmaceuticals needs a new gimmick. They're sponsoring a scientific TV show, but it sucks. Marketing head Mr. Taco comes up with a new plan. You see, a botanist just told him about Faroe Island, where the natives harvest red berries and worship a giant demon god. So it makes perfect sense to send 2 cameramen on an expedition to bring back this giant demon god by themselves and make some commercials with it.
I think it's fun. It's not Skull Island.
It's fun.
It's Faroe Island.
Right, they change it. Skull Island. Anyway.
Which, it wasn't Skull Island in the original King Kong.
You're right, you bring that up in the bonus episode.
Yeah, that it was not called Skull Island at any point in time in the original 1933 movie. That happened in the novelization and after the fact.
So the marketing head, Mr. Tako, sends out 2 crew members, Sakurai and Furue. Before they leave on their expedition, Sakurai's sister Fumiko wishes them luck, while her fiancé Fujita mentions he's going on his own voyage to test a new super strong wire that his company is developing. This will be important later. For now, we cut to the Seahawk, a United Nations submarine that crashes into the same iceberg that Godzilla was trapped in 7 years ago. Godzilla escapes, destroys the submarine, and also destroys a military base for good measure.
Was it the United Nations or the US? I thought it was just the US.
The summaries I saw online were United Nations, though I do believe that the U.S. Navy appears later in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the actors had like American accents, so I could have just completely like, oh yeah, this is a Navy ship.
The thing is, when writing these, some of the like popular summaries of this movie are incorrect, because I look at like Wikipedia and Wikizilla and, you know, like a few other sites just to just like grab names and make sure I have like notes. But it's like, I think the Wikipedia summary lists Mr. Tako as like the CEO of Pacific Pharmaceuticals, which isn't right.
No.
So, you know, if there might be small details here and there. Anyway, the Seahawk run by white people who have their English ADR'd onto them. We need to talk about that later. Anyway, submarine dead. Godzilla's back. Oh no. Mr. Tako is enraged by Godzilla's reappearance because that will take attention away from the giant demon god he's sponsoring. Sakurai and Furue rush to Faroe Island, where they encounter island natives who are definitely Japanese people in blackface. Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely wild. The original King Kong Godzilla, deeply racist in its depiction of the island natives, and yet no blackface. This one, just, oh boy, lots of blackface.
So you said the original King Kong versus Godzilla. I think you meant the original King Kong.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, yeah, the original King Kong
King
movie.
Kong, 1933, almost 30 years before, at least hired black people for their racist depictions of island natives. This one, they were like, nah, let's just put incredibly Japanese people in blackface. And like, let's put the camera right in their face so it's very obvious. The duo give the natives a radio as a gift, and then later that night, help attempt to fend off a giant octopus that attacks the village. Things seem dire, as the octopus is immune to bullets. But then, King Kong himself appears and defeats the octopus. Kong then grabs some jars of fermented red berry juice, drinks them, and then passes out drunk. Sakurai and Furue are somehow able to build a raft, tie up King Kong, and take him off the island, all off screen. Mr. Tako meets up with them on their ship and now wants to pit King Kong against Godzilla to drive up ratings. But the Japanese government tells him he can't do that because it's wildly dangerous and also technically smuggling? None of that matters, because King Kong starts waking up and then escapes after the crew tries to blow him up with dynamite. Meanwhile, Godzilla is just wreaking havoc. Sakurai's sister Fumiko is on a train that is attacked by Godzilla, and her fiancé Fujita rescues her at the last moment. This is extra sweet, because Fumiko thought Fujita was already dead due to Godzilla destroying the ship he was on, but Fujita had left the ship early and missed being Godzilla'd. The Japanese government briefly considers using the H-bomb against Godzilla, but decides to try 3 other plans first. Plan A, have King Kong fight Godzilla. This doesn't work, as Kong just throws some rocks at Godzilla, and then Kong takes like 1 atomic breath to the chest and decides to just walk away. Plan B, have Godzilla fall into a giant pit trap and then blow him up. That also doesn't work, because of course it doesn't. Plan C, let's try the giant electric fence again. The giant electric fence strangely works against Godzilla, at least enough to annoy him. But then Kong reappears and reveals his innate electricity powers. That's right, King Kong's electricity powers. King Kong grabs the cables from the fence and eats the electricity right up. Kong then grabs Fumiko and climbs up the National Diet Building, which is a lot less impressive than the Empire State Building. With Sakurai and Furue's help, the military launches gas made from red berry juice that knocks Kong unconscious. Then, using Fujita's super strong wire, remember, that was important, the military airlifts Kong over to Mount Fuji for a King Kong Godzilla rematch. The two kaiju fight once more. Things look dire as Godzilla beats the hell out of Kong. But then, lightning strikes King Kong, supercharging him. You know, because of his electricity powers.
He goes Super Saiyan.
He goes super monkey. The two continue fighting, and Kong gains the upper hand. As the two tackle each other off a cliff, only Kong emerges from the ocean and swims away into the sunset. But onlookers wonder, is Godzilla truly dead? Bum, bum, bum. So, Kayla, what'd you think?
What a film. It's so fascinating because, like, it is stupid.
Yeah.
It is a stupid movie, but also it is a comedy. Like, I do feel the movie works, actually, because you are viewing it through the lens of almost parody. Like, it's a comedy. It's a commentary on Godzilla and Kong and, like, the movie industry and the very capitalist business side of show business. The original King Kong film is very much about the exploitation of nature for profit, or like the exploitation of living beings for profit. And that is also what this is about. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really bring in like the existentialist atomic threat of the original Godzilla movie, but as opposed to the other Godzilla sequels that we have seen, this one tonally works for me.
Really?
It worked like because I feel like it's very consistent in its tone the entire time of like this is kind of ridiculous and of the way that people are sort of treating the threat of Godzilla and Kong. Everybody is very consistent in not necessarily taking it super seriously. My problem with some of the other, like, Godzilla sequels had been that it would be this sort of whiplash between these comedic moments felt out of place in movies that were trying to be epic, but not quite having, like, the emotional impact and character work that the original Godzilla movie had. This one, Ishiro Honda was like, I have to make this movie, and I'm going to make it as well as I can, and it's going to be making fun of the people that are making me make this movie. And there is like a strong theme in this movie. Like Ishiro Honda has a point to make and he is making it. And his point is in tying into that original Godzilla movie, like the exploitation of King Kong for profit is a bad idea. Like, I mean, he does save them from Godzilla, but they let King Kong go, and the entire time, it's very clear that Tako is like an idiot and doesn't, like, at no point in time do I think that we are supposed to think, like, that we're supposed to be on Tako's side here. Like, it seems to me so very clear that Tako is a dumbass.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that this is a silly, greedy idea that should not be pursued, and that is reinforced by at the very end, like they literally are like Honda does his whole character looks almost into the camera but not quite and delivers the message of the film, which is it was something along the lines of like, we humans have so much, like, let Kong go home, we humans have so much to learn from nature. This movie has like has a point to make, and it makes it. Like, and that's not necessarily something the other Godzilla sequels don't necessarily have this level of coherency. And also, Ishiro Honda is a good filmmaker. When you look at this movie, it is put together well in terms of its cinematography, its score, its direction. Like, it's a good, well-made popcorn munchin' film about a ridiculous spectacle, but Honda is still like looking into the camera right at the audience and saying, so like, is this what you want? And we all have to walk away thinking like, is that what we want? Like, and should we want that? Like I don't think it's a bad movie at all. I think it's ridiculous, but I think Honda made his point well. And also, it was really funny.
Yeah, it was really funny, and I agree with you. I think Honda made his point well. I did not like this movie that much.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Honda came in with a message, and you're right. It shot pretty well. Well, I mean, I think the transition from black and white to color was rough for them because now you can see more of the details of all like the tiny models of the tanks and trains and the fire trucks, and they look a bit more fake outside of black and white.
Yeah,
but anyway,
it is easier to see that they're fake, but it's still like well put together.
The main thing with me though is that like it's well put together. I actually liked the human characters, and there was like that comedy to it. There's a very clear idea. The issue is that you go into this movie with the broader idea of this is King Kong versus Godzilla, and they commit the unforgivable sin of making the fight scenes between them boring.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. The first fight scene between King Kong versus Godzilla is literally like they walk into frame, they stand in they stand in one place, they don't move around. King Kong throws some boulders at Godzilla, and Godzilla just kind of like shrugs them off, and then he breathes his atomic breath on King Kong's chest, and his chest kind of lights on fire a little bit, and then I can't over describe this. King Kong just like looks down and it's just like, oh, that hurt. And then he just slowly turns around and walks away. Like there's no like Godzilla raids again. Godzilla went for the throat. Godzilla was like, you're fucking dead. I'm going to rip your throat out with my teeth and then burn your body with my atomic breath. But then, King Kong versus Godzilla, King Kong is just like, wow, that kind of hurt a little bit. And then he just turns around and walks away a little dejected. And then the second fight is mostly them kicking rocks at each other. Like Godzilla like pushes King Kong down and then kicks rocks at him for a little bit. And then Kong gets supercharged and then throws some rocks at Godzilla. And then there's not much going on.
There is this funny bit actually where at one point Kong throws a giant rock at Godzilla and then does kind of this duck and roll. And I at first thought, I was like, oh, he's like evasive. Like he's being evasive and dodgy. But it's like, oh, he just kind of tripped from the force. Like he threw the rock so hard, he lost his balance, rolled away, and then like hit his head against a mountain and like lays there dazed and confused while Godzilla advances on him. And I was like, oh, I thought Kong was being like evasive and had tactics, and it was like, no, they're just... Yeah, I'll give it that to you. Yeah, like the fight scenes are boring, but also I have found many of the fight scenes so far in these movies boring. So that didn't really register to me as anything like notable, I guess, in the ranking of this film.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you look back at the previous movies and it's, like Godzilla Raids Again came out like 7 years before. It was still in black and white. But like, even though it's just very clearly two people in suits, like, wrestling against each other and all that, at the very least, they, use the sound design to make it seem like two animals thrashing against each other. They have a city ablaze behind them. Like, they fight, on top of this monument and then tear it down. And then Godzilla goes for the throat and they do the close up of him, like, putting his teeth into the throat. Like there is this energy of two animals in a life or death fight. And in King Kong versus Godzilla, it's two bored people just kind of throwing styrofoam at each other.
Well, I kind of wonder, I would not be surprised if Ishiro Honda did that on purpose. If he was so resentful of the idea of having to do this King Kong versus Godzilla thing, and so disinterested in this who would win in a fight scenario, that he's like, fine, I will give you the fight and it's gonna suck. Because there is so much, in my opinion, effort and care put into the rest of the movie. Like, again, he didn't really want to make this movie. But like you said, he was like, well, if I'm going to make this movie, I'm going to do the best that I can. But this whole movie is like a fuck you diatribe against the studio and its business aspect of show business. And it's, what's the word I want? Soulless attempt at art.
Yeah.
That he was like, fuck you, the fight scenes are gonna suck. This will be a comedy making fun of you the entire time. All of the effort's gonna go into everything else. And then that big spectacle that you wanted, guess what? It wasn't worth it because it's not art. So to me, the fight scenes being boring, I mean, maybe they were intentional or maybe they weren't, but I do feel like they sort of add to Honda's like, fuck you. I think it's valid to be like, to be displeased that the fight scenes were boring, but I do almost wonder, like, if this whole movie, if the big difference between, like, if you did everything the same, but then the fight scenes were super cool and epic and, like, wonderful, would that sort of undercut everything that Honda is saying about, like, it's stupid to think, like, to match them up against each other. I mean, there is a quote, literally, like, it's not a wrestling match. Mm-hmm. I know. Well, I suspect that we'll get to the more recent Godzilla versus Kongs, and the more recent Godzilla, like, fights all of these other monster things to be like, yeah, it was so epic, so cool, blah, 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 etc. Mm-hmm. And fully, like, buy into it. But I think it's interesting that in this early iteration of the Godzilla movies are not wrestling matches, when Honda returns and he's like, how dare you turn my existentialist monster into a wrestler? And then he says, no, it's not. It's going to suck. Like, everything else in this movie is going to be as good as I can make it, except the fight scenes, because fuck you for wanting that. It's like, you depraved masses, you know? Because you have to think, like, well, they probably could they have done it better? Again, like, is it intentional? I don't know.
I think they could have done it better, because I think we've seen them do it better. Like, I think, you know, the destruction in Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again, like, yeah, these are fundamentally people in suits. But at the same time, not only do they make the environments look better, but also they make the movements between the suit actors look better. Like, it's just, like, you look at the fight scenes in Godzilla Raids Again, and then you look at the fight scenes in King Kong vs. Godzilla, and at the very least, in Godzilla Raids Again, they move around. There's, like, burning buildings behind them. Like, the fight scenes with King Kong vs. Godzilla, especially the first one, they stand in singular places on, like, either side of the frame from each other, and then just, like, throw things at each other, and then they walk away. Like, at the very least, King Kong could have taken an atomic breath to the chest and then ran away. But the energy of him, like, sulking and turning around and walking off screen is just such a mood killer.
When I say, could they have done it better, I suppose I am positing a question that we will never get the answer to, because I want to know, how restrictive were those suits? How much time did they have to film the fight scenes? Did they spend all of the money and schedule and the budget doing everything else and then cram this into the last 2 days of shooting? Like, when I say, like, could they have done it better, I'm wondering, like, were they, in the sense of, was this intentional? Did Honda say, I want this to suck? Or did they kind of just run out of time and that was sort of the best that they could do? Because Honda spent all of the time on everything else and all of the money, like, on everything else, and then left this to the last bit. Because, like I said, he's clearly not interested in it. Like, the fight scene sucks because he's not interested in it. My question is, and we may never get the answer to this, of course, is whether or not Honda was intentional in his disinterest, or if it's one of those things where it's like he couldn't bring himself to care, so it just sucked, versus, like, he wanted it to suck because he wanted it to be a fuck you. You know what I mean?
I'll still say this. I think Honda was definitely putting in, like, effort, not only because he explicitly said, like, hey, I didn't like this project, but I'm still going to make it the best I can. But also there was another story I found while I was researching this. The scene where King Kong grabs Fumiko and climbs up the National Diet Building. First off, very funny. That's very clearly just like a Barbie doll in the guy's hand.
Yeah, but I thought it was fun that they were like, what does Kong do? He grabs a woman and he climbs a building. We'll do that again.
Yeah, exactly. What does Godzilla do? He bites a train. Let's do that again. But so that scene, there's a story where, like, Honda was shooting that and it's like, this isn't working. So he called up the guy who played Fujita, Fumiko's fiance, and Fumiko's the girl being grabbed by Kong. Mm-hmm. And he called him on the set and it's just like, hey, I need you to just, like, run up and say this one line of, like, let her go, you bastard monkey, let her go, like that. Like he was, like, on set, he's just like, hey, let's call this guy in, let's just write this into the script, let's just shoot this to bring up the energy of this scene. So at the very least, he's, like, paying attention to, like, the energy of the scene in at least that instance, and is willing to make changes in order to make for a better scene. But, you know, you're right. We don't know how much leeway he had on the rest of the stuff.
Notably, that scene involves human characters.
True.
At threat. Like, that scene involves the lives of human beings being endangered because of the greed of another guy grappling or, like, trying to control a power that he cannot control. Like, that is a scene about the consequences of, like, human arrogance and greed. Godzilla versus Kong, those fight scenes are not really about the consequence of human greed and corruption and et cetera, et cetera. Like, that scene is like a part of Honda's whole point, in my opinion. I mean, I don't disagree with you. The fight scenes suck.
Yeah.
I just am like, well, I think that fight scene sucking lends to the entire point of the movie, and I'm not necessarily mad about it because, like I said, I mean, I haven't been truly very astonished by any of the fight choreography in any of these movies, and that could just be because of my modern sensibilities. I don't appreciate it. I mean, we had an entire thing in the King Kong bonus episode where I was like, I felt like these action sequences were too long and too boring, and Kevin was like, how dare? So this could just be also our sensibilities clashing a bit.
By the way, so, Willis O'Brien wanted these to be stop motion, but that would have been too expensive. So Toho was like, hey, let's just put King Kong in a suit. One, Willis O'Brien did not like that decision. But also, Marion C. Cooper, the original director of the original King Kong movie, also did not like King Kong versus Godzilla. Specifically because King Kong was a guy in a suit. Like, he's on record saying, like, he thought that was a bad decision. So...
I don't think it looks quite as good as...
Oh, of course
I don't think the suits look as good as the stop motion, but that's sort of... I mean, yeah. Like, of course the suits don't look as good as stop motion, but to me, that's a given.
So I also just want to talk about Mr. Taco here for a second, because I do love him as a character. I love his design with his, like, mustache and, like, when he puts on, like, the safari cosplay. Like, he's very...
Oh my God, yeah.
He's very willing to be, like, the butt of the joke. But also, like, I think my favorite scene in this entire movie is when Mr. Taco sees the headlines for Godzilla showing up, and his immediate response is, damn it, this is gonna get in the way of our ratings.
Yeah, no, let me just a clarification. Mr. Taco is not aware of being is not willing to be the butt of the joke.
Oh, of course.
The actor playing Mr. Taco is willing to be the butt of the joke and knows that Taco is the butt of the joke. It's kind of like J. Jonah Jameson and J.K. Simmons in the level of, like, they understand this person is not a serious person. Mm-hmm. And... I mean, I actually, this is not giving enough credit to J. Jonah Jameson, who is actually, like, a pretty good character. Moments. He's a great character. Yeah. There's also there's a one point, once they're like, oh yeah, we have Kong, and then Mr. Taco's like, I'm gonna go meet up with the boat or whatever. He puts on his safari cosplay, which he didn't go to the island to get Kong or anything. He's just, like, he's going to go meet up with the boat that's bringing in Kong, because there's, like, he wants to see it, and also I think there's, like, issues happening or whatever. There's this whole thing where they're like, oh, the Japanese government isn't allowing you to bring King Kong into Japanese, like, waters back home to Japan, which, thank God, finally a sensible decision from an adult.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I love that the Japanese government is like, yeah, this is a bad idea for all of these reasons, and also this might technically be smuggling goods.
Yeah, and then Taco is like, no, it's okay. I will use corporate law and loopholes to make this happen. And he does. And again, it's Honda pointing out the way that corporations are totally morally bankrupt, and that even when the government is trying to, like, rein them in, the government is powerless in the face of all of the power that the corporations have gobbled up. Like, it is, I'm just like, again, like, yes, at every point in this movie, Honda is making a very distinct argument. But Taco puts on the safari cosplay because he's ridiculous and he's not actually an adventurer, and it's like Elon Musk's Iron Man cosplay, And then the two cameramen marketing people that he sent are wearing, like, matching Hawaiian shirts because, again, they're so ridiculous. These people are unserious. It's so funny. I was like, oh my God, look at them. They're so cute in their little ketchup and mustard Hawaiian shirts.
The duo also do a great job. I don't really think there's any character traits that, like, distinguish them from each other, but I think just, like, as a duo. Yeah.
Well, one of them is, like, we shouldn't be doing, like, one of them is, like, a coward. I mean, he's sensible. Yeah. Calling him a coward is like, I mean, he's very sensible of like, we shouldn't be doing this. Let's go home. And the other one's like, no, it's okay.
So Kayla, real quick, you've worked on TV shows. Imagine this. You're on the set of a TV show. Mm-hmm. The head of the TV show comes up and is like, hey, Kayla, we need to send you out on a run real quick. Not for coffee. You and this camera guy are going to go to an island in the Solomon Islands and pick up a giant demon god for us.
You know, there are restrictions about what sort of animals are allowed on set, actually. So that's very much not my department and not my job.
God. So funny.
Yeah, no, it is. At the end of the day, though, Godzilla arrives again on... Well, so let's talk about Godzilla. Godzilla is in an iceberg. So is this supposed to be the original Godzilla or the one that got trapped in the ice in Godzilla Raids Again?
I think this is the one that got trapped in the ice in Godzilla Raids Again, because he starts this movie trapped in the ice.
Okay, right. But he's trapped on an iceberg in the Arctic, and in Godzilla Raids Again, he was just on an island that they covered in an avalanche of rock and ice.
Yeah, there's a lot of continuity snarls in these movies.
Is this a third Godzilla?
This might be a third Godzilla.
Okay, so we have Godzilla 3.
Maybe. This could be Godzilla 2 or Godzilla 3.
It's another Godzilla, and he's trapped in an iceberg in the Arctic Ocean. And this submarine, which may be the United Nations or it may be the United States, only a rewatch could tell, and we're not doing that, bumps into it, basically, and unleashes Godzilla unwittingly upon the world, and Godzilla's like, well, time to go home to Japan and wreck it again, which I do feel there is something to be said in there probably about, you know, either the United Nations or the United States once again unleashing terrible tragedy via their own incompetency and ineptitude to control a power that they cannot control. And then it shows up on Japan's shores. But luckily, these ad execs, friggin' Don Draper over here, has wrangled King Kong. And they're going to use King Kong to fight Godzilla because King Kong is instinctually aware of a threat to his own title of king. And Godzilla is like, yeah, I love fighting other giant monsters. So they duke it out, and King Kong does win. And Godzilla, if Godzilla is still meant to be a symbol of atomic anxiety and thus like the advancements of science and technology, like uncontrollably, like the uncontrolled and incautious, incautious, not cautious.
There we go.
How do you say, what is another word?
Reckless.
That's the word. And the reckless, advancement of science and technology coming to bite us in the ass, which I am not a Luddite. I simply think that we should be careful and have regulations on new sciences and technologies. I think that's a reasonable position to make. And then King Kong is representative of like raw nature. King Kong does beat Godzilla, which is kind of this overarching theme of like, well, it doesn't really matter what humans will do because in the end, the might of humanity's like quote unquote technological advancements will always inevitably lose to the unforgiving inevitability of like nature. And it kind of harkens to this idea like that the eco-fascist idea of it doesn't really matter like what humans will do because eventually the earth will recover, life will go on. It just might not necessarily like involve humanity or involve as much of humanity, which is problematic because in that sort of thinking is kind of like, well, so you guys are okay with millions of people dying, if not billions of people dying?
That's a really interesting read on like the themes of this movie, though. Like especially the representation of King Kong as like nature versus Godzilla's inexorable advancement of technology to the detriment of nature. I like that. And here's the thing: under that reading, I am now more willing to forgive King Kong's innate electricity powers because now in the final fight, he is rejuvenated by nature, by the thunderstorm inexplicably hitting him with a lightning bolt and causing him to get supercharged.
Yeah, I mean, Godzilla has superpowers, so why not give Kong a few to even the whole thing out? I mean, my issue with the Ankylosaurus in Godzilla Raids Again was that it didn't have superpowers.
Oh, Anguirus?
I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, I was like, why doesn't Anguirus have superpowers if Godzilla gets superpowers and they're both supposed to be like, you know, prehistoric dinosaurs that have been altered by the atomic age, but one gets atomic breath that it doesn't use until it tears out the throat of its enemy when we don't know, my whole thing in that episode was like, just have Anguirus immune to Godzilla's atomic breath or whatever. And they sort of, I was a little bit happier with this and how they had like, oh, Kong has like resistances to electricity and these great powers. So then I was like, fine. Like the science is wobbly, the logic is wobbly, but I am willing to more go with like King Kong is like more resistant to atomic breath because King Kong has some sort of like super endurance happening.
There you go. I will also say that Anguirus gets a bit of a redemption arc in a later movie, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah, he becomes Godzilla's best friend, his special pal, his little guy, his rotten soldier, etc. You've mentioned.
It's great. Also, by the way, going back to the Seahawk real quick. So I mentioned this in the summary, but the Seahawk is crewed by like a mostly white cast, and they don't speak English, so the English is ADR'd over their mouth movements, and it's very awkward. And I think my headcanon is that
the English is also weirdly accented. Yes. Like I could not. It sounded like somebody faking an American accent, but I couldn't figure out what their original accent was. And I'm just like, so you put a bunch of Japanese actors in blackface for the Islanders, but you pulled out these generic white people from God knows where. I have no idea where that, like, are these white people who grew up in Japan and like that's why they don't speak English? Like they just happen to have be like descendants of European or American immigrants to Japan that never learned clearly English. Like maybe they speak like Swedish or German or something. And then also like the people doing the ADR also are not native English speakers. Like that's what kills them. Like you found white people that don't speak English to do like the dialogue, and then you found other people to ADR it that don't speak English, which these could be Japanese people maybe reading English translations and like yeah, like that could be, you know, they don't need to get like a white person to do the ADR for this. They just need somebody to read English. And it did really feel like somebody was reading English and trying to do their best mid-20th century American accent, and it was so awkward.
I like to think this was Honda getting back at the American re-edit.
Yes.
It's like, oh, all right, now let's get some white people and dub them over and make them look ridiculous.
Exactly. Again, this entire movie is Honda's fuck you to the well, not Hollywood necessarily, Hollywood and the Japanese studio system for what they have turned Godzilla into.
God.
And what they're trying to turn, like, the original King Kong movie, when we talked about this in the King Kong bonus episode, the original King Kong movie had some very interesting and, like, poignant points to make in all of its big, like, pulpy sci-fi adventure thing that it had going on. But the argument, of course, on that was how intentional were all of the points that it was making versus, like, we know that Ishiro Honda was being very deliberate at everything he was saying in the original Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
And thus is being very deliberate in everything he's saying in this movie. The only thing that we don't know is how much he wanted the fight scenes to suck or not suck.
How much it was like the studio being like, you know, these fight scenes also need to be comedic, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. And there is a note here you have in that, like, they wanted them to fight because they thought that would put butts in seats. But also you had a note here from Ishiro Honda, A Life in Film from Godzilla to Kurosawa.
Read the book.
April 1962, there was a wrestling match between Japanese pro wrestling superstar Riko Dozan and tag team partners Toyon Bori and Great Togo against American challengers Freddie Blassie, Lou Thez, and Mike Sharp, aired nationally on Japanese television. During this bout, Blassie bit Great Togo on the forehead, opening a horrible bloody gash. Two elderly viewers, shocked by the gory sight, collapsed and died. In the previous movie, in Godzilla Raids Again, blood was drawn in the monster fight. In this one, there is no blood drawn. And Ishiro Honda makes a point of this bloody wrestling match is it possible that the studio was like, you can, like, we want them to fight, but we don't want it to be gory or excessively violent because we can't shock people because this is the 60s, this is post-Hays Code in America. I don't know enough about Japanese, like, cinema and whatnot to talk about, like, censorship in that era. But it is quite possible that part of the reason it sucked a little bit more is that after this, like, wrestling match and the reactionary, like, was part of the reason that they're like, well, it can't be, they have to fight, but it can't be too violent. They have to fight, but it can't be too intense. And that sort of made them pull their punches a little.
That's a very important point that you bring up. So first off, that wrestling match happened, let's see, April 1962. And then this movie comes out in August. So that's kind of like the cultural landscape that we're dealing with here. A few months this happened, and it's part of like, oh, TV's bad for you. Look, it killed these two elderly people because of all the shock and spectacle. But also the thing you bring up where it's, yeah, this movie has less blood. It doesn't go for the throat. And it's because this movie is the start of Toho trying to make Godzilla incredibly kid-friendly. And as we go through more and more of these Godzilla movies, they become sillier. They become more kid-friendly. To the point we're going to get to a movie where a kid daydreams Godzilla in order to figure out how to deal with his bullies. And it's fascinating because, you know, we like the tone shift here as well. Like, you know, you said at least the tone in this movie is consistent. There is a comedic tone to it rather than like the very serious tone of the original Godzilla or the kind of midway point with Godzilla Raids Again. But King Kong versus Godzilla, it is the turning point of Godzilla, I think, where Showa Godzilla becomes the more like campy, like full-on professional wrestler Godzilla that we're going to see in the rest of these movies.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not until, when it comes to American cinema at least, it's not until we get into the 70s where things really start to get generally dark and edgy on a much broader landscape.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of 60s cinema, when I'm thinking of like what's dark and edgy in 60s cinema, it's Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Which the amount of blood in Hitchcock's horrors and thrillers is still really, really low. And so I would not be shocked if there is a similar sort of thing happening in Japan because of just the general, people are people no matter where they are. And if people in America were worried about the effect of television on American audiences, and people in Japan are clearly worried about the effect of television on Japanese audiences, and they know King Kong versus Godzilla is going to be aired in both Japan and America, then even if they weren't both having a dual crisis, they know at this point that they're making an audience, or they're making a movie for an audience across the Pacific too, and it's going to affect sort of what the studio mandates are, especially with King Kong, which is an American character. Like,
mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, this movie originally originated as a King Kong movie and then was sold to Toho. So yeah, I do wonder if the lack of intensity in the fight scene is a studio mandate, actually. I mean, I think it would be very punk rock if it was Ishiro saying, like, fuck you, it's gonna suck, because that's what you wanted and I hate it. But I also would not be shocked if it was partially a studio mandate of, like, it can't be too intense. And they're like, okay, well, you know, again, we're still in early phases of filmmaking, of early phases of action movies. Like, we talk a lot about how the first few decades of movie making is also us understanding and learning this new art form that is not quite theater,
mm-hmm.
And is not quite, you know, comics or literature. And yeah, I mean, that's like obvious in lots of movies where you could see like they don't know that they can do this yet. They don't know how to do this yet. And it could also just be like they don't fully know how to make a fight scene that is like kid friendly and not intense and also like really interesting,
mm-hmm.
because we haven't had the practice yet. And that's not me saying that that filmmakers now are necessarily smarter than filmmakers then, but filmmakers then were inventing the wheel and filmmakers now already have the wheel in a lot of ways. One of the things that's really interesting about kids media. When you're looking at media for kids, there are lots of mandates these days about what can and can't be in children's media. And one of the big things is that violence, you have to be very careful with violence in children's media. Not necessarily because it's like, oh, kids can't handle violence and it's corruptible, but Nickelodeon and Disney and Cartoon Network are conscious of the fact that younger children are going to be watching these shows that might technically be aimed at slightly older children, but younger kids could be watching it, and kids can develop at different ages, and adult supervision is a little shaky sometimes. And so the violence that is in cartoons or kids shows generally has to be violence that children cannot imitate. So you can't have SpongeBob throw a rock at Squidward because kids might imitate, like a small child might imitate that because they don't understand that like their friend is not going to react the way that Squidward reacts getting hit by a rock. Because Squidward's going to be fine getting hit by a rock, but like their friend might not be. And the kid, like a small child, just does not have that level of critical thinking and consequences until they cause the consequence. Like they have to cause the consequence. So it's like if kids are gonna, and kids act out what they see in shows. They do. Like they play pretend that they're in shows. It's what we did on the playground.
It's interesting to see the waveform of like the standards of violence in children's media, because like Super Friends, you can't even throw a punch, and then you have Tom and Jerry where it's like they're hitting each other with mallets, and then you have like 90s like Fox Kids like Spider-Man animated where they're back to like not throwing a punch and all the guns have to be lasers. And then, like, nowadays we get to a point, it's like Avatar, where it's like they're using martial arts, but they also have these special powers. But also there are cartoons where it's like, at the very least, like they can throw a punch. But if the violence itself is like cartoonish, then there's a better standard for it, I guess. We're past the points where every fight scene has to be people tackling each other.
Yeah, the thing with Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry is that that's slapstick.
Yeah.
That's outrageous and exaggerated. And it's interesting because anime and cartoons influenced by anime also have slapstick violence in them, but because it's not presented in the way that Americans who grew up watching Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry see, they don't always recognize it as slapstick. Because I remember, to continue going off on this tangent where we talk about violence in film, in Full Metal Alchemist
mentioned, we got it.
Yeah, we got it. In Full Metal Alchemist, there's a lot of slapstick, and this happens in general in anime, but speaking specifically to Full Metal Alchemist, Winry has this big wrench. She's an engineer, and she has a wrench, and she'll hit Ed with the wrench. And I absolutely have seen takes online where people are like, Winry is abusive, and she hits Ed with the wrench, and blah, 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 and this and that. Completely ignoring the fact that every time Winry hits Ed with the wrench, and we see Ed, like, whine about it or what, like, he's injured and blah, blah, blah. All of that is always in, like, there's an art style change. There's always an art style change in the manga or the anime when that happens, at least with Brotherhood. I don't remember 03 well enough. And the art style change is indicating to the audience, this moment is now slapstick. And because the show and the comic have real, actual violence that is treated incredibly seriously throughout the entire thing, but then it also has these moments where everybody is like, the art style changes and everybody is chibi and it's exaggerated, and Winry hits Ed, that's supposed to be a moment of slapstick violence, not taken seriously, done for comedic effect. It's not necessarily like as real as any of the real actual violence because it's a different art style. And this is something that does not happen really that much in American cartoons. And so American audiences don't necessarily see the art style change as the trigger of, and now we are going to be mildly like not canon and silly and fun and have a slapstick violent comedic moment. Because they're not used to, it's either slapstick or it's not slapstick. And anime flips between it, and it indicates what we are to take seriously via the art style change.
And getting back onto the main road here, it's then interesting to look at the violence in King Kong versus Godzilla as this cultural shift. We're now at the beginning of the 60s. Toho wants Godzilla to be more kid-friendly. We're in, color. and the violence is no longer two animals going at it and biting each other's throats. It's two, people in suits throwing styrofoam rocks at each other and, shooting laser beams and lightning at each other.
And the King Kong that people are used to are the Hays Code edit of King Kong that is less violent, that has been airing on TV.
True.
Not the original one. They cut out lots of the violence in the original King Kong when they put it on TV to adhere to the Hays Code.
It'll be very interesting to see how the kaiju combat goes on as we go further through the Godzilla movies. So, is there anything else you want to say about this movie, Kayla? Because I'm interested to see what you would rate this one.
I would like to say first, not first, but last and foremost, I was very relieved when I got to the end of this movie and there was no love triangle. I was waiting the entire time for there to suddenly be a love triangle because, and I should have known because I wrote, one of my first notes I made was, it is so nice to be in the hands of a capable filmmaker again, because this movie starts and you're just like, oh my God, Honda's back. We're safe. Everything's going to be fine. We're not going to get a weird love triangle shoehorned in. But I was waiting because I was like, well, Honda did do a love triangle, so maybe there's going to be one. And this is not me saying that I hate love triangles. I love a good love triangle. But I was just like, we can't fit it in. We don't have time. But I was like, maybe the studio is going to mandate it because they're like, all right, what makes a King Kong movie? King Kong picks up a girl and he climbs a tower. Check. What makes a Godzilla movie? Atomic breath? Destruction of Japanese property? Check. Also, love triangle. Wait, there's no love triangle. Honda, put one in real quick. But there's no love triangle in this film. And also,
I now want the love triangle between Sakurai, Furue, and Mr. Taco.
I mean, and I would be here for it. But also, wait, hold on. Was this a fiance or wife or girlfriend situation? Because it's always been fiance. But now I'm realizing I didn't notice, actually. I was so busy paying attention to King Kong and Mr. Taco that I didn't realize whether or not it was, we're engaged or we're dating or we're married.
Fiancés. Fumiko, who is Sakurai's sister, is engaged with
Because
Fujita.
it's always engaged. It's always engaged.
It's always engaged.
I don't know why. If you know why, if you, dear listener, know why it's always engaged, if there is a reason that I am missing because I lack some sort of cultural context, please, I'm dying to know. I don't want to Google this because I feel like I'm not going to get a good answer if I try and Google it. But if you know, please tell me.
God. All right, so what would you rate?
I would rate this one.
Get in the comments, everyone. Get in the comments. What would you rate?
I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Really?
Yeah. Because I really appreciate what Honda is doing with this movie and where this movie stands in cinema history. The fight scenes are not good, but I don't necessarily think that detracts from the point of the movie. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a genuinely, very funny film. I mean, it's funny in the way that old movies are funny.
Yeah.
It's not funny in the way that, because comedy is so subjective and so it changes over time and stuff. But I thought this was hilarious. I really appreciate what Honda did with the hand he was given here.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. And
interesting.
Yeah, originally I was going to place on the same level as Godzilla Raids Again because, at the end of the day, here's the deal. I did not like this movie that much, but I agree with you. I loved the comedy of it. This movie did genuinely make me laugh. So that I think that does put it a little bit over Godzilla Raids Again. But I think the fight scenes themselves being boring when, the studio purpose of this movie was these two titans are about to fight each other, I think is more of a sin to me than it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think also just a lot of this movie was slower than the previous movies. There's a lot of lingering shots that don't really do much. And I think the character actors behind the suits, especially the character actor in the King Kong suit, could have put a bit more liveliness into their performance. Yeah, here's the thing. I still laughed. I still had a somewhat good time. So 2.5 stars out of 5 for me.
Oh, one other thing, real quick, that I just wanted to point out that I was just so aghast at, and I was meant to be aghast at it, I think. When they are bringing King Kong back to Japan, It's so funny the way that they're doing it. They're towing him. I like in the original King Kong movie, they're like, don't worry about how we got King Kong back to America. It doesn't matter. He's here. Especially because they bring King Kong from an island in the Pacific to New York. And I don't quite remember when the Panama Canal was finished. So either they took that sucker through the Panama Canal or they went all the long way. I don't know. They put him on a train maybe across the country. Who's to say? In this movie, they do deal with how you get King Kong off of the island, and they stick him on a raft, and then they tow the raft on the boat. But their contingency, because they're like, well, he's asleep, but he could wake up, and then he'd be dangerous, is that they put a bunch of dynamite on this raft. And I'm like, not only have you kidnapped this animal from his home, you put dynamite on the raft so that if he wakes up, you're going to blow him up to protect yourselves. He did not. Godzilla is an active threat against Japan and humanity. Godzilla attacks people and deliberately causes destruction. Ishiro Honda looked at the original Godzilla movie, or looked at the original King Kong movie and said, you know what? We have not seen Kong attack unprovoked. Now, the Islanders do sacrifice a wife to, like a bride to Kong, much in the same way that in the original Godzilla movie, they talk about the Islanders, when they notice, like, oh, the fishing is bad, Godzilla is awake, and he's hungry, they sacrifice somebody to Godzilla to keep him happy.
And Kong also steals their red berry juice. He loves getting drunk off their red berry juice. In this movie. Yeah, in this movie. But also, I kind of got the idea that part of, like, that they make this alcohol, partially because they know Kong will drink it, and then he'll pass out because he's drunk, and then he'll be, like, docile, and he's not going to hurt them. Like, I didn't necessarily see it as, like, Kong is, like, stealing this resource. I kind of thought it was, like, the Islanders, like, make this because then Kong drinks it and is, like, chill with it. Like, it's kind of a deterrent sort of a thing. The Islanders have a practical application for the red berry juice. It does come up in the film that they do use it to help them sleep. And also, it's like, what else are you going to do?
So, I don't... I mean, that... But also, him stealing their sleeping potion is... not the same as, Godzilla ravishing Tokyo. So Ishiro Honda looked at King Kong and was like, this guy mostly only attacks, like, when provoked. And I mean, he made Godzilla. Godzilla causes destruction as, like, a consequence, again, of, like, human atomic exploration, et cetera, et cetera. But he made this whole point of, like, they're kidnapping Godzilla from his home. And then if Godzilla wakes up and is a threat to him, they're gonna kill Godzilla. And it's like... Or not Godzilla, King Kong. And it's like, what the hell did Kong do? Like, it's so... This is like taking a lion out of... Like, putting a lion in the circus, and then, like, you're gonna shoot the lion if the lion does something that you don't like. I'm like, just put the lion back. It's so unfair to Kong. I was so affronted, and I was really glad that this detail was, like, put in there, because I do fully think that Honda was like, look at how disgusting this is, at the way these people are treating this animal.
I have to bring up one last thing about animal abuse before we go into the outro. There is a rumor that, so the giant octopus scene, right? That's just a regular octopus.
Yes, very clearly a regular octopus.
Very clearly a regular octopus that they just, like, filmed in a different thing, and then they green screened everyone else to, like, fight the giant octopus. There is a rumor that special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya ate one of the octopi that they used for the filming after, like, they filmed the scene.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's necessarily animal abuse, because, like...
I just think that's funny. Just the special effects director films the giant octopus scene and is just like, man, I've been staring at this octopus all day. Licks lips. People
eat octopi.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily... If I had an objection to... I mean, it's kind of weird, but also, yeah, people eat octopi. I've tried it. I don't really like it that much, actually.
It's good, especially in the right kind of sauce.
I don't like I don't enjoy the texture of it. And there's a whole other debate, of course, on whether or not octopi are, like, how intelligent they are, and thus whether or not we should be eating them because they're intelligent. But honestly, once you start on that pathway, you're going to get down a very long line of, like, okay, well, actually... There is definitely evidence that fish can have fun, and thus, like, we eat just regular fish. Is that okay?
Well, before we get onto another large tangent, because I know where this is going to go. Before we go onto another large tangent.
I am a meat eater. I'm not opposed to eating octopi.
I'm a meat eater too.
I got canines for a reason. I believe in, I think it's important to have ethical.
Okay. Kayla, I'm trying so hard to get back onto the highway here.
Get in the comments. Come at us.
We respect you, vegetarians and vegans watching.
Is the modern meat industry ethical to you? Can you afford ethical meat? Do you believe hunting should be outlawed? I'm getting us engagement, Kevin.
Let's see if we can use any of this audio. So, Kayla, what are we watching next?
Next, we'll be watching Mothra vs. Godzilla, 1964. This is not to be confused with Godzilla vs. Mothra, 1992. Much in the same way, we confuse King Kong versus Godzilla with Godzilla versus King Kong, even though it's actually not Godzilla versus King Kong, it's just Godzilla versus Kong. You can legally find this for free on services like Tubi, Crackle, Amazon Freevee, and Pluto TV. If you like this podcast, be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, leave a comment, and share with a friend. Follow us on social media. We got the links in the show notes. We have a Ko-fi. You can support us there and get access to cool bonus content like extra episodes and access to the private Discord where you can talk with other geeks about Godzilla and all things Digital Kaiju. Check it out. Gorilla Whale is a production of Digital Kaiju Studios. It is hosted and produced by Kevin Carpenter and Kayla Knutson. Gorilla Whale has no official affiliation with Toho, Legendary, or any other companies associated with the Godzilla or Kong franchises. We thank you for watching along with us. Until next time, watch out for kaiju.
Watch out for kaiju.